Greetings and welcome, listeners. Today's presentation is all about muscular dystrophy. Listen carefully and make notes. Pause if need be. This presentation is brought to you by Vanessa, Natasha, Jaden, and Dimitri.
So a little bit about the pathophysiology here. It's primarily inherited, so it's an abnormal gene mutation that affects the production of proteins, important proteins responsible for maintaining the structure and function of muscle fibers and their integrity in various muscle groups around the body. It encompasses a group of genetic disorders characterized by progressive muscle degeneration, and because it's mainly inherited, the disease really can't be prevented and can essentially be triggered at random. So any potential symptoms can include the inability to relax muscles, muscle pain and stiffness, visually abnormal enlargement or reduction of muscle mass, as well as delayed muscle growth. A little bit about the diagnosing process. It would typically start with an assessment of family medical history to identify any history of muscle disorders or symptoms that could suggest muscle degeneration or weakness, anything like that. And then next would typically be a detailed physical exam to get an understanding of muscle strength, muscle tone, and any signs of inefficiencies within the muscle or muscle wasting. Also, blood tests could be conducted to measure the level of various enzymes, such as creatine kinase, which are typically elevated in individuals with muscular dystrophy. Also, EMGs could be used to measure the electrical activity in muscles, and if we see any abnormal patterns there, that can help in the diagnosis process. Also, genetic testing, which involves analyzing DNA samples for mutations in genes associated with muscular dystrophy, such as the dystrophin gene, which is tied to the Duchenne muscular dystrophy, DMD, which is, we'll get into that later, but that's one of the most prevalent forms of this disease. More about the diagnosis. So in some cases, a muscle biopsy may be performed, which is essentially just a small sample of muscle tissue being taken and analyzed under a microscope to assess the muscle fibers and structures and detect any abnormalities there. Also, MRIs could be used, or ultrasounds, to visualize muscle tissue, identify any waste, and assess their involvement in various movements. So cardiac evaluations like ECGs, echocardiograms, are also important for assessing cardiac involvement, which can occur in certain types of muscular dystrophy.
The demographics and statistics. The risk factor, more prevalent in males and those with a family history of a form of muscular dystrophy. The reason, muscular dystrophy is more prevalent in males due to the X chromosome linkage, hormones, muscular fiber composition, and environmental factors. It is also more prevalent in people who have family history due to the genetic linkage. If a parent carries a mutated gene associated with the muscular dystrophy, their children have a 50% chance of inheriting the condition. Kind of just to understand this a little bit more, if the female parent is a carrier and the male has the condition, both the female and the male child will also have a 50% chance of inheritance. If the female parent has the condition and the male does not, 0% of the female child will have inherited the condition and 100% of the female child will be carriers. 100% of the male children will inherit the condition. If the female parent is a carrier and the male parent does not have the condition, 100% female children will not be inheritors, but 50% will be carriers. 50% of the male children will inherit the condition. For those who aren't fully understanding of genetics, a carrier can only be a female as it is X-linked. When we say carrier, we are talking about having one dominant and one recessive chromosome. Dominant chromosomes are non-mutated chromosomes, in other words, healthy chromosomes. Recessive chromosomes are mutated chromosomes that hold the gene for the condition. A carrier will have the mutated gene, but will not express this gene as the dominant gene suppresses the recessive gene. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is one of the most common forms and affects approximately 1 in every 3,500 male births worldwide. And this overall prevalence of all of the muscular dystrophy combined is estimated to be around 1 in every 5,000 individuals. We just mentioned that Duchenne muscular dystrophy is the most common type of muscular dystrophy, as well as the X-linked recessive component. And that's really the main component of why men will have higher prevalence of inheriting the condition compared to females. And the reason why is the defective gene is located on the X chromosome, and females have 2 X chromosomes while males only have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome. The males will most likely inherit the condition because if they receive the X chromosome that is defective, they only get 1 chromosome, and so they won't have a dominant chromosome to suppress that recessive chromosome, so they'll inherit the condition at faster rates than females, because females have the 2 chromosomes that are X, so they are more likely to inherit a dominant that can suppress that recessive. Hormones also affect the likelihood for inheritance. Testosterone, which is present in males at higher levels than females, worsen the condition at faster rates than we see in females, and this is because of the likelihood of muscle damage. Estrogen, which is present in females at higher levels than males, actually protect the muscle fibers from the condition's effects. The other component is muscle fiber composition. This affects the condition's rate as well, because males tend to have more fast twitch muscle fiber proportions, which is important for explosive movements, but it also has a downfall because you're more likely to be damaging your muscles. Females tend to actually have the slow twitch muscle fibers, and that has more resistance to damage. Due to males' fiber composition, they're more vulnerable to effects of the muscular dystrophy. The other effect is environmental factors. And this has to really do with physical activity and exercise, which can worsen the condition at faster rates due to the percentage or the more likelihood that muscles will be damaged. And males tend to be more injured in physical activity than females. The other component is of environmental factors is the exposure of toxins and chemicals that may increase the risk of developing the muscular dystrophy. Males may be exposed to higher levels due to occupational and recreation activity compared to females. So we're going to look at due to mutation causing reduction in the dystrophin gene. The dystrophin gene is the largest human gene that provides the instructions for the body to make a protein called dystrophin. The protein dystrophin is located primarily in the muscles. Its function movement of skeletal and cardiac muscles. In the skeletal and cardiac muscles, this helps strengthen muscle fibers and protect muscles from injury during muscle contraction and relaxation. The dystrophin complex is an anchor that connects the muscle cell's structural framework with proteins and other molecules outside of the muscle cells. The dystrophin complex may also interact with proteins that send and receive chemical signals to play a role in cell signaling. In other words, dystrophin is a stabilizer that prevents damage from contraction. The dystrophin that is created actually renders the muscle fibers vulnerable to the damage during contraction. These muscle fibers undergo a cyclic of damage and repair due to the initiated inflammatory response, leading to gradual breakdown of muscle tissue. This breakdown of muscle tissue actually gets replaced by fat and connective tissue, and this just results in atrophy and the progressive weakness. These are the other variations of muscular dystrophy. Pause the video so that you can read the slide and understand what the other types of variations are that are less common.
So there are actually many treatment options available helping combat muscular dystrophy. But just to be a little more specific, these types of treatments offered for this disease do depend on the different symptoms a person may be occurring, which in result helps differentiate the treatment types a person needs, if that makes sense. For example, in some cases, muscular dystrophy can lead to scoliosis, and a treatment for this is scoliosis treatment through spinal fusion surgery. And obviously, this type of treatment is not going to be done for joint inflammation, which can also be caused by this disease, which is what I mean by the statement before, where treatment depends on different symptoms. Following the slides here, the first type of treatment is prescribed medication. Like said before, medication is prescribed depending on the type and symptoms caused by muscular dystrophy. These symptoms can include inflammation, slow muscle degeneration, heart-related problems, and respiratory-related problems. The example we use here is known as corticosteroids, which are prescribed to reduce inflammation and slow muscle degeneration. The next type of treatment, which are all more common in the general public, is mobility aids. When a patient seeks to regain mobility and the independence they once had without having to go through surgery, the implementation of resources such as wheelchairs, braces, and other assistive devices can be used to achieve this. And then to people who are struggling with breathing or other related respiratory problems, respiratory support can be offered where there are two types of ventilation devices. There is an invasive mechanical ventilation device, which is recommended if respiratory muscles are affected, and there is a non-invasive mechanical device where respiratory muscles are still in good health. Moving on to other treatment options, there is, of course, surgeries. Again, depending on the symptoms a person is experiencing, these surgeries, which are directly related to muscular dystrophy, can include scoliosis correction, as explained in the example I used above, joint replacement surgery, and cardiac surgery. The surgery names are pretty straightforward to explaining these, where there is cardiac surgery done to combat heart failure problems, and joint replacements, which are done to replace severely deformed joints, such as the knee and hip. Lastly, there's therapy. The first type of therapy offered is physical and occupational therapy. This is where therapies actually help maintain muscle function, improve mobility, and prevent muscle contractures. Then there is gene therapy. Gene therapy involves identifying the genetic mutation causing the disease using viral vectors to deliver a functional gene copy into the patient's muscle cells. This corrected gene then instructs cells to produce the missing or defective protein, which in result helps restore muscle function.
Lastly, for our musculoskeletal questions, we have: what is muscular dystrophy and what causes it? What are 4 symptoms caused by muscular dystrophy? And what demographic of people are most likely to be diagnosed with muscular dystrophy? As a multiple choice question of A, female, B, males, C, lower to middle class people, and D, elderly people. Now, thank you for watching our video, and I hope you learned a lot about muscular dystrophy.